There should be illustrations to accompany this recording. I did them over 10 years ago, and a few times again within the last 10 years. Sorry about the noise, I'm making a cup of tea whilst I make this recording. Okay, but I can do it in a visual description. This was the information I was being, because of the nature of the technology, I believe it to be Andromedean technology. I believe I was being sent this information through telepathy from extraterrestrial entities. It's not the sort of thing I could have come up with myself. Well, maybe, I don't know. I had previously done a lot of study research into some of the fields involved. Now, what you need to realise is that the description is metaphoric. And being so, it functions on multiple levels of reality at the same time. And in doing so, it is itself a conduit, a bridge between those different levels of reality, and that is intentionally a part of what is being transmitted here. So it becomes very difficult sometimes to know which level we are specifically referring to, because there is a hard physical object which can be constructed with resources and materials in the real physical world, but it's also at the same time communicating a lot of information about uses for the human aura, the energy field around us, and things that we can do with that. And some of the artifacts which develop from the very basic model, because it can go in different directions. Some of those artifacts relate directly to the astral, the energy field, the aura, and some of them are more physical. Some of them are more. One of it's a form of light bulb. One of it's a form of engine. But the symbolism between that and uses for astral projection, uses for the soul. You've heard of orbs. You know what an orb is from the spirit world. Is a glowing ball of light. Well, a light bulb is a glowing ball of light. So if someone says they saw a glowing ball of light, a UFO is a glowing ball of light. Are you talking about a spirit? Are you talking about a light bulb? Or are you talking about a UFO engine? Well, we're talking about all three because they follow the same principles. They conform to the same format at a very basic level of what's being transmitted here. And they're trying to transmit all three of those things at the same time. So the derivations from this very simple model develop in different directions, and that's where it becomes more of a specialist. This one is particularly talking about a form of light bulb. That one is particularly talking about a form of spirit travel. This one is particularly talking about a machine, which is an engine, which helps us to spirit travel. This one's talking about a machine, which is an engine, which helps us to physically travel. See the differences here. But it all comes from the same basic pattern, and I've got to transmit that same basic pattern and explain it. And it's ludicrously simple once you understand it. That's the thing. It's like, I'm sure you could describe to me how to build the standard kind of light bulb that Edison and people invented. Because you've got a metal filament coil inside a glass container filled with gas. And when you pass electric through it, it glows. We can all describe that. But we didn't all come up with that idea in the first place. For most of human history, none of us thought of doing that. And it's one of those things that once you understand the principle, it's so bloody obvious, everyone knew it all along. But before you learn it, no one did, you see? And that's why communicating this information then takes on another factor, because I want to share this with the world for free. I want anybody to be building these things. But I know that as soon as I put this video on YouTube and someone takes it seriously and invests money in it, I won't see a penny for it, and they'll patent it. And they'll patent all derivations. And then it will be owned by a big company. Like what happened with the petrol engine, which was originally designed to run on water so rain could power your car. Like what originally happened with the light bulb. When Tesla invented alternating current, he came up with an invention so all of us could have free electricity, harnessing it from the rotation of the planet, because that generates energy, and he found out how to suck that up and to radio it into devices. Now in the 21st century, people are rebuilding Tesla's inventions and proving that that works. You've got all these Newtonian physicists saying, it contradicts the laws of thermodynamics. Yes, it does. The laws of thermodynamics are incorrect. That's been proven. I've seen it with my own eyes, because I've had inventors come round to my house showing me these things. Why they go to the extent of knocking on my door and saying, Joe, we don't really know why we're showing you this, but we feel compelled that we have to. That's because the spirits are an element of human ingenuity and progress. So we can't really be critical of 100 years of slavery to paying bills to a company for something which was originally invented to give us for free, because that's the way the spirit works as part of it. In Shinto religion in Japan, spirits are responsible for nature. Well, we are a part of nature. We can try and urbanize ourselves and civilize ourselves away from nature, but all that's proven is pollution happens with our radioactive fallout, with our plastic from the petrochemical industry that we're all reliant on. We don't have to be. You know, the original design for the petrol engine was a water engine. They changed it, they adapted it to turn it into a petrol engine, because then they could have the monopoly, financially control an empire. I don't want that to happen with my inventions. And a large part of it is a visual meditation which you can go into, which helps you to progress astrally as a discarnate soul, which as soon as you leave your body is what you'll be, especially if you choose not to go up the white tunnel of light, right? You will be relying on two things if you choose that: the shamanic exploration way, instead of returning to the source, which a lot of people are now saying is the reincarnation process. The spirits I know who have left that, they say they've never encountered God. There's no such thing. They say that they've shown me there are two ways they know to travel. One is to use your own internal energy, basically to teleport. They don't have a physical body, but they can appear to look like what they looked like when they were in physical bodies, if they have the energy. Of course, our attention gifts energy to whatever we put attention on, and it doesn't just do that. But if we are in a particularly, let's call it a red mood, and we put our attention on something, we will gift it with red energy. If we're in a blue mood and we put our attention on something, we'll gift it with blue energy. It's not as clear cut as just like adding a +1 to the power on the battery pack. There's different essences, there's different natures of energy, and a lot of it is gridded into formats. So when you put your attention on something, you grid that thing into the format of that grid. It's like a circuit. People do that to other people all of the time, manifesting each other's realities, which is ultimately a form of slavery that we're trying to get away from. It's a very difficult one, because people don't even recognize they're doing this all the time. We're not taught how attention works. Where attention goes, energy flows, to quote one of the writers who was writing about this at the end of the last century. I can't remember the name of that person, sorry, but it's a very catchy catchphrase. Where attention goes, energy flows. It doesn't just flow into it, it sets it into a grid because of the nature of that energy. It's fundamentally important that you understand that as a major precept before applying any of the devices which I intend to teach you now, which you can use as a visual meditation. A major part of it is self-balance. The more balanced you are with yourself, the more powerful you become. Jungian psychology explains about facing the shadow self. You have to assimilate your dark side by facing it, like looking into a mirror and going, yeah, I did do all that shitty stuff. yeah, I have got all those negative things. That is a part of me, but I'm not going to hate myself for it. I'm just going to accept that. And when you accept your darkness, when you accept your shadow self, you become a lot more powerful. You don't become evil. You have the free choice. In some schools, they would call this the black goo energy of the earth. In some schools, they would call this... I'm trying to remember the name of it now. I can't remember the name of it. Vril. V-R-I-L. Vril. It's all the same stuff. What we're doing is we're looking for self-empowerment. We're looking for freedom, liberty, but it comes with responsibility. Every step you go up that step ladder, every step you go up in energy, there's more responsibility, and the powers that are will not permit you to have too much responsibility. It's all a test. You've got to remember that it's all a test. And if you think that you are out of the loop and you've got freedom of choice and you can do what you want, you're being tested. You're still on a rung of the ladder. Every rung of the ladder, every step is twice as high as the last step you climbed. That's how much energy you've got to get. And a lot of the assholes vampire other people to get their energy, which means they haven't got enough respect, they haven't got enough energy within themselves sustainably, because they haven't learned how to do that, to get to the next step of the ladder. So they can't even see that there's a higher step. They can't see a further horizon. So they deny it exists. But some of us at times in our life have become pure enough to get there, to see that it exists. Developing the ability to channel information about devices is a part of that. So without much further ado, I should really start explaining what some of these devices are. But I am worried, because if anybody... You'll listen to it and you'll laugh and you'll think that's stupid. What a load of hype over nothing. But if you take it seriously, not only as a spiritual study, as a visual meditation, what you can do with your aura and how energy works, it's a very basic teaching of how energy works that every person should be taught about. This should be free information for everybody. But as soon as people start figuring out how to apply it to mechanical machines, there will be patents and copyrights. There will be ownership of ideas and ownership of derivatives of ideas. I've already got notepads full of this, some of which have been stolen from the house I lived in before. I don't know where they went. So somebody else has got one of my original notebooks with these ideas. That worries me, because for all I know, it's already been patented. But more likely, somebody who is involved in stealing those ideas is not spiritually aware enough to read it and see the potential. They're more likely to read it and think, this guy's crazy, what, he's making a load of hype over nothing. And there is a comfort in that. So I myself do not have the funds to acquire and construct the devices I have been taught about. Or I have channeled. Instead, I applied it to music theory, using headphones, using left and right speaker pans, using reverb halls, chambers. And as long as the math codes are all the right math codes, you get the desired effects. And that's when I started developing it in that direction. It's a basic blueprint which can go in lots of different directions. I've got to have a sip of my tea now because I'm thirsty. Ginger tea, it's balancing my yang energy. I had low yang energy for a long time. No assertiveness, you know. Right, so here goes. You have a sphere, like a bubble, like a circle. It's hollow on the inside. It's made out of mirrored glass. So from the outside, you can see right through it, and you can see everything inside of it. But from the inside, it's a mirror reflecting back to you yourself if you're sat in the middle of this orb. That itself, that's number one, right? That's visual meditation idea concept step one. There's tons of steps of this, and it gets more and more complicated, especially as its derivatives goes off into different areas. In the very, very center is a source of light, an emission of light. As the light particles radiate from the core, they go in all directions, 360 degrees squared, or whatever that is. You know, it's not just a flat circle with 360 degrees, it's a globe, it's an orb. So the light particle is going in, how many faces does a circle have, you know? Is it a hexadecimal circle or what? I don't know. Is it like a fly eye thing? I don't know. Like a geodesic dome, you know, all sectioned off. Like a football pattern or something. Or, no, in my model, it's smooth. It's a complete sphere. So you've got so many arcs of radius in there. Now, as the light particle, you have so many arcs of radius, it's impossible to measure how many there are. So we're going to start very simple. We're going to measure one light particle. And our one light particle moves from the center, and it moves outwards to the edge. And when it hits the mirrored glass, it bounces back because it's a mirror towards the center. It might bounce a different direction. We'll get into that later. Right now we're at step 2, okay? Not at step 4 or 5. Another light particle is going in the other direction. And when it hits the mirrored glass, it bounces back to the center. Now these two light particles, they go outwards, they hit the edge, they return, and they hit each other at the center. What do they do when they hit each other at the center? That's where it splinters into a ton load of different different steps, different potentials. So again, we're going to keep it very, very simple. We're going to go on to another analogy now. Okay, instead of developing that further, because you can see the development, you'd have tons of particles bouncing all over the place inside the globe. Now, those two light particles, when they return to the center, the central point is now bright because it's got two glowing particles. Not just one glowing particle, two glowing particles. They've come from the same source and they've gone outwards and they've hit the center. And it's doing that way, diagonally. It's going all over the place, you know. There are layers where they all, if there's tons and loads of them inside there all bouncing off of each other, it's going to form layers after they all settle down, because it will be chaotic for a while, but then they will settle down, and the way they're bouncing off of each other is going to form regular patterns. Now this is where you need to look into cymatics. When you get a speaker with a tray full of sand and you play certain tones through it, it vibrates the sand into shapes depending on the frequency. Well, the frequency of light is measured as kilohertz. The frequency of sound is measured as hertz. It's all harmonic. So depending on how fast the light is vibrating, how bright the light is, it's at a different cymatic. And you imagine an analog synthesizer machine changing how much energy is being put into that light source, how much energy is in this glowing thing. From the outside, you just simply see it as a glow, because it's glass on the outside. Now, the next part, this is part 3, right? Part 2, I started to develop some understanding of part 2A, part 2B, part 2C, and so on, with the weather cycle patterns of how the particles are interacting within the orb. Because in part 3, you have the inside of the globe is not a mirror, it's only 50% mirrored, it's 50% see-through. So when you look at it from the inside looking out, you see a reflection of yourself superimposed over what's on the other side of the glass. It's like half mirror, half window, right? Now, this permits a light particle. When the light particle hits the edge, the light particle does something amazing. Half of the light particle leaves through the glass and shines and carries on journeying outside of the sphere. Half of the light particle returns to the center. Okay, I'm not going to argue about how can a particle split into two. That's a stupid thing. Let's make it easier. We'll measure it as a light wave. The light wave is what hits the edge of the glass. The light wave refracts back towards the center, but at the same time it splits and it keeps on going. You're familiar with the particle split experiment. So now the thing itself is not. It's not only the orb itself that's glowing, but the light, the air, the space around it is also glowing now, but only half as brightly. Yeah, the lumens within the thing are twice as many lumens as the area all shining around it is, because the mirror is only 50% on the inside of the orb. Now, can you see why people think this is ridiculous? What the hell is this guy going on about? At this stage, I do need a break to sit and drink some of my tea, because I confused myself already, and we're only at step 3. I don't want to just leave it here. I feel to justify it, I should take this further and further and further. Okay? Because we've now got 2 different machines. We've got one machine which reflects all of the light back towards its center, and in doing so creates weather cycles inside of it, which are like cymatic tones depending on the frequency, the volume of the light emission going on within there. The second machine actually glows up the area, the space around it, more like a light bulb. Suddenly you realise you can make one of these by spraying the inside of a light bulb with a semi-mirrored, semi-translucent, or a fully mirrored material. Obviously, you wouldn't actually be able to see from the outside to the inside if the inside is fully mirrored. This is the difference between the practicality of the physical universe compared with the metaphysics describing the energy universe of a human soul or of an aura, of an orb, which is not existing in the physical universe in the same way that physical objects such as mirror, glass exist. This is why it becomes metaphorical. And you need to understand how those two things interact, and this is what we're exploring. And we're still at the most very, very basic stages. Applying this stuff to build an engine that is going to give you more light output than you're putting into it. What if that mirrored glass is a solar panel? You know, it's soaking up half of the light that it's emitting itself, but it's doing that in 360-degree directions. So it's actually soaking up and refracting back to its center more lumens than it's radiating in the first place. Or is it simply reflecting back into its center the same amount of lumens as it's reflecting in the first place? Yeah? And this is where the critical difference of 0, not meaning nothing, 0 doesn't mean nothing. The circle, it means balance. Yeah? 100, take off 100, add 100 is still 100. Right? The same amount, 100%. But what happens if it's leaking 50% of its lumens are leaking out through the surface, but 50% reflecting back to the center? But that 50% that are reflecting back to the center are all existing in the same place because they're reflecting back there from all directions. So 50% from the left and 50% from the right makes 100%. Then you've got 50% from the top and 50% from the bottom. That makes 200%. That's twice as bright as what is emitted in the first place. How? And then it emits that. And then you've got 400%, 800%, 1600%. Suddenly you're into like this exponential curve of there is more brightness being radiated from this thing than the energy there was there in the first place. The surplus energy has got there because it's reflecting itself back to itself. Where is the energy loss? Well, in the world of gravitational physics, there is energy loss. Newton's physics do have quite a lot of say-so, even though I disagree that they're 100% accurate. There is going to be some energy loss. The energy loss is because it's also glowing up the air outside of the globe, outside of its sphere of influence. Its sphere of influence. As a light bulb, it needs to. What if in the center of this, like, if you're soaking up the energy that it's emitting? I've got to laugh now because it seems so ludicrous, you know. People are going, is this real physics? The maths make sense, right? This is the problem. The maths make sense to say that using this type of device, we now have a machine that can give us an infinite number of more energy than what we start with. What? I need someone to check these maths, you know? 50% to the left, or sorry, 100% goes out to the left, 50% returns. 100% goes out to the right, 50% returns. 100% goes up, 50% returns. 100% goes down, 50% returns. Suddenly we've got 400% in the central point. And there's 400% zoomed off outside of the thing. Now, if we measure this in terms of lumens, how luminous it is, which can be measured in terms of hertz and kilohertz, it's a theory, you know. Now, I'm hoping to decondition you from your lifetime of being taught Newtonian physics to suddenly realize here we have a mathematical principle which in theory works. Does it work in the physical world? I don't know, it has yet to be tested. Does it work for souls which are not in the physical world? Therefore, they are not subject to Newtonian physics. Well, my argument is those souls are the people who I'm communicating with, who are giving me this information about how the spirit world physics works or can work when an entity is in perfect balance. If an entity is not in perfect balance, it is not a sphere, a globe, reflecting back upon itself, its own energy to reinforce itself. If that happens to it, if it goes dysfunctional and its energy is leaking out all over the place, it's attaching to places in time, which it doesn't necessarily need to be attached to. Its attachments are mortal attachments to the physical realm. This is spirit physics. What's that got to do with light bulbs? You know, well, it's all energy. It's how energy works, and it's one pattern, one format, which applies on multiple levels of being. Now, if I've got one of these machines as a car engine that's giving me more energy than I'm putting into it, that's generating energy, my car will power. If I am one of these machines, when I leave behind my physical body, because I've let go of the attachment to that, because I've become more harmonic and more balanced with my spiritual self, then I can astral project, but I will have sufficient energy in the astral state not to need to come back to my body. I'll be free floating, but I will have this pattern to know how to keep myself energized, not only to keep myself energized, but to create as much energy as I ever need to. That's being they call this being connected to the source field, you know. It's not so much that you have the ability to connect with a supreme deity, because I don't know if there is a supreme deity, but it's that you can connect with this infinite source of infinite energy. Now, what we know about the infinite source of infinite energy is that energy conforms to grids when it manifests. When we do anything with it, it comes into the shape of a grid to hold it into that form, to hold it into that shape. And there are many, many different grids. Each has its own nature, like each individual person has their own nature. So at the same time as, to use some very basic Christian metaphors for it, at the same time as you can exist connected to the divine deity, you have to, in Carl Jung's, you have to assimilate the shadow side, which is your own individual uniqueness. And what is your own individual uniqueness? Well, that's what they're calling the ego. That's what they're calling the satanic part of us. That, if that's what it is, that's what it is. There's, in this incarnation, there's who I am as Joe, who is this guy who walks around, who's just cut his dreadlocks off, who has this particular opinion about this particular thing, who wears these clothes, who does this lifestyle. But that's not my long-term transmigrated, purer, higher self. That's not my soul level energy. This is why you've seen the Egyptian symbol of a line with a circle on top of it. And you've seen the Egyptian symbol of a line with a circle on top of it and a line going up pointing to that, yeah? That's your direct communion with the deity, which is this life, which is everything you are as an ego, everything you are as I've got a job, this is my job, this is my self-identity, whilst I am living in this lifetime in this body. But when you leave that, and that's the direct path to it, straight to the balance, the horizon of the wholeness, the circle, which is this orb which I'm talking about. This was carved on Assyrian temples, Egyptian temples, Mayan temples, Cambodian temples, Babylonian temples, because we knew this stuff, we were taught this, everyone was taught this stuff in the ancient past, and the energy technologies involved with constructing the pyramids, and the pyramids themselves being machines to connect the energy sphere of the planet Earth with the energy sphere of different planets around different stars, because that's the scale it works on. Because the planet is that energy system, and the planet is that configuration, that cymatic tone. We're living through a time now, the millennium, the year 2012 was on one of the Mayan calendars, the year 2000 was on the Gregorian calendar. All the calendars mark this passing, like within 50 years of where we are, 20 years ago, 20 years in the future, give or take, this bit of history, especially like from now on in the next 20, 30 years, is the dawning of the next harmonic. It's the Chaldean tone of the planet and of our light bodies, because we're connected with the planet, has changed. It's accelerated. It's gone up in pitch. All the events in politics are the stagnant, dogmatic, problematic, old world institutions for control crumbling and breaking down and going crazy. But the spiritual side of things is this acceleration is happening. The machines we'll be using in the future will be based on these Andromedean physics. Our understanding of what we are, energy beings are we, not this crude matter, said Master Yoda, who got it from Don Carlos Castaneda. All of that shit is going to become the mainstream science, and we'll see a unison between the two things. So, I've been talking for 35 minutes. I'm going to have a break, finish my cup of tea, think about what I need to teach you next as step 4. We're only on step 4, man. I've taught you the first 3 steps. And each step has got its own subdivisions that go off in a lot of different directions. And each one of them is metaphoric between the lower earthly plane, the higher energy plane, the higher spiritual plane. Let's just keep these 3 planes, yeah? Keep it nice and simple like our ancestors taught us. It's already beyond complicated. So there you go. I'm back with teaching all this stuff, and maybe someone who sees this will be ready for it. Because when I taught this stuff 10 years ago, they had me misdiagnosed as being a crazy bastard for believing in this stuff. Let's check out if we're any more ready to evolve yet, human species, because we need to. Love you.